Hello, everyone. Glad you're able to join us tonight. We got a show of continuing looking at the Murdaugh homicides out of South Carolina and the trial and some of the reconstruction of the crime scene we're going to be talking about tonight. And so, before we get into that, as always, uh, for people that are new to this channel, respect the families, respect mods, and respect each other. Enjoy your time in chat. And as we go forth with this and everything, I want to thank all our mods. Y'all are absolutely fantastic. And we appreciate everything y'all have done for this channel. And and we got some good news also. Mrs. Steve went showing
Woo!
we have upgraded. There you go.
There we go. We've upgraded.
To a splint, and we got her cast off, so she's moving forward in her recovery.
Woohoo!
And but tonight we're going to be talking about recreating and reconstruction of crime scenes and what you can learn not only from the study of crime scenes, but also as you recreate them, certain things pop out to you, and you understand it a little bit more. Now, not all crime scenes are recreated. And they just go upon historical data and things that crime scene investigators learn. But before we get into that, I'm going to do our introduction as we normally do for our people that's new to the show. This is Mrs. Steve, and I'm Steve. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I started off my career working in the jail, went on the road, then went into investigations. During that training, I had everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician, and which helped my investigative career. And I've handled cases all across the board from thefts, burglaries, up to homicides. And then I retired and found out about the true crime world and the YouTube and everything out here with web sleuths, and started this channel. And as we've grown, which I thank everyone that assists and helps has helped us get to the where we are now. And as we move forward, allowing us to go out and work some of these cold cases and help these families that have reached out to us. And we look forward to the future. All right. With that being said, of course, we're looking at Alec Murdaugh, who is accused of killing his wife and his son back in June 7th, 2021. We have a sketch, a diagram of the crime scene, and this is just a little overview of outside, about 1,000+ feet away from the Murdaugh home with some dog kennels. Alec Murdaugh said that he came home later that night and found his homicide involving both his son and his wife, called 911, in which over a extensive investigation resulted in him being charged with those homicides, and currently the trial ongoing. As the information has been released and we see some photography and we get some of the testimony that has come to light, and there was some confusion. I watched and saw people debating, and so I decided to recreate this crime scene. And I want to thank the mob crew, Chris, who also helped me. Miss Sarin became a YouTube member. Thank you. Appreciate your support. That's awesome. That in the last couple of weeks we've been working, planning, and he released debuted the show last night of some of the video I had created on the recreation and sent him. And I thank him for that and appreciate it. And anyone, I'm going to be doing a slide presentation tonight. I won't be introducing the video. It's already out there. It's on Chris's channel. And anyone that wants to go over there and watch it, it's Mob Crew. And we have it linked in the description. Just jump over there.
Drop it in chat.
And we'll be dropping it in chat throughout this, so that just hit that link, go over there and watch the video as it in real time, or as many times as you wish. We thank you. But for the presentation part of it, I did a lot of stop still frames so that you'll be able to see as we discuss certain things that occur at a crime scene that investigators look at. That during the investigation, everything at a crime scene tells a story, just as I spoke in the last video. And each part of that story, everything from the angles, the trajectories, the stippling or the tattooing on the skin that could be caused by the muzzle blast, the angle and blood spatter, blood trails, all that tells a story. And you'll see at the end of this, at the very end, I'm going to talk about that not all blood is created equal. And you'll understand that by the end of this video. And you'll understand the importance of some of the blood spatter, of how it was created, and why normal people are never exposed to certain types of blood spatter unless you're at a crime scene. And if you have that type of blood spatter on you, it can only come at a certain time. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight and lead you into and discuss. Because crime scenes are absolutely we have become so accustomed seeing CSI and how crimes are solved in our miniseries that everyone loves to watch. And it's evolved over the years. When I first started, CSI was not even a term in law enforcement that anyone envisioned to what it would become. We didn't have DNA at that time, and I saw that coming in. The DNA was known, but it had not been allowed into the courts and being used that much. And so as this evolved and we got to this state, and sometimes with the DNA, we lose sight of the forest to the trees, due to the trees. We get and that is something that we rely upon so much that it has to be DNA. That's not always the case. It doesn't have to be DNA. There's a lot of things about a crime scene that can solve that case without DNA. And there's some of that evidence may or may not come in this case. And if it does, you'll understand why it is so important that if any type of blood stain is located or is identified on Alec clothing, body, shoes, either what he was wearing at the scene that night, or possibly what he may have, changed clothes, or on certain types of the firearms, or even in the his residence among other clothing. It's extremely important. But we'll go through here. Of course, this is the crime scene. There were certain defects in the glass and the birdcage rack or whatever that is back there. Then we have blood spatter and blood trail in the room where Paul was shot. And of course, we can tell a lot from that, from where he was standing, where the blood trail starts.
Josh, 3-month member.
You missed it. You didn't pull it.
I can't pull it. It's
okay.
the member thingy.
Oh, okay. Appreciate it. Thank you for being a member thing. I don't know.
It's the 3-month member thing.
Okay.
I don't get those. They tell me about those.
Okay. All right. But anyway, so you can, as crime scene investigators and analysts, you look at these things and I'll tell a story. I covered a lot of this in the show the other day. So if you want to see the first show, it was 3 days ago.
Oh.
What we got?
Single mom of 4 gifted 5 memberships. Thank you so much.
Appreciate your support. That means a lot to us. It really does. Awesome. Thank you. But and then of course we see from the outside of it, and there's a cone showing a direction that is indicative of which way the fatal shot was fired. And then of course I recreated the feed room, went out and positioned from what the blood trail told me to what the defects in the materials and the shelving behind him and into the window, and looked at that, created something that's within close proximity of what that room would have had to allow for such an injury, such as the first shot. Then, of course, the second shot from the doorway was a different shot. But I went out, recreated this, fired a shot, and this was the angle that would correspond with that window behind Paul. and at the height of where that defect in the window was. And so just wanted to recreate. We're going through this. And then when I fired the shot, one of the most important things that we can tell from a victim when there's any type of weapon used, such especially with firearms. Of course, if you're using knives and things, you are close. But with a firearm, there are certain things that as distance increases, the impact or the telltale signs of proximity diminishes. But if you have those telltale signs, such as stippling, or what, when it hits the skin, it causes tattooing, that this stippling is indicative of a firearm that's fired at extremely close range, within 4 feet, 3 feet, 2 feet. And you can tell because if you have this stippling effect, you simply go out, take a firearm of a similar, if you have the weapon, or if you don't have the weapon, a similar caliber, and go out and do experiments until you mark and create or able to recreate the same stippling effect. And that'll give you a proximity of what that range is, because stippling, the gunpowder that's unspent and travels out with a shot shell on this 12 gauge, only goes so far, and then it starts diminishing. And you can see from the pattern of that stippling approximate how close that muzzle was to the shot fired. And here you see there's a 12 gauge 1 foot that's extremely small and condensed. And as you see, when this shot shell was fired, it went out, and the shot shell actually took most of the stippling with it when I shot this cardboard at the 1 foot. And you're probably only looking at an area that's probably about 2-3 inches around. Whereas with the when I shot at 3 feet, you're getting out here where it's a much less dense pattern of stippling, and the shotgun's further away. So you would have to look at it and see that, okay, this is pretty close because we're only 3 or 4 inches. And so we have that. But I took the measurements of let me get to where I got here. I placed the mannequin, Manny the mannequin, representing Paul's position.
Manny,
I see Copper Horse came up with that name.
Okay.
But
good job.
I placed that mannequin approximately 5'7". I'm somewhere 26, 1, 6'2" now. I used to be 6'2", but old age, you shrink. And so I was able to take the shotgun and put it up close range, and I was able to shoot. And I had through the torso of that 5'7" mannequin in a chest shot, and I had marked the window pane that's over his shoulder with where you see here a marked area prior to shot. And when I fired, that angle was pretty close. It did exactly, it went within that same area. And so I was well pleased with that shot, showing that, yes, that gun orientation, Paul would be in where the blood trail started, and that angle is continuous. So that absolutely tells us a story that that part of the theory is correct. And then I moved Manny outside to the doorway where the fatal final shot was fired. Now I'm using ballistic gelatin and synthetic blood. And when I fired the shot, of course, if you watch the video as it goes through, it is absolutely a catastrophic event. And the muzzle energy, which is the kinetic energy that as it interacts with human tissue, it is absolutely catastrophic of what it will do to the human body. And as you'll see through these still slides, or if you watch the video, it's a trigger warning. If you're triggered by anything, and like I said, this is all synthetic stuff, but it is ballistic gelatin is made to perform and act in the same manner as what human tissue acts. And of the crime scenes I've worked, it's very close to, it's very similar, and the characteristics of it and what happens. And as I processed this crime scene, and I'm still processing it, the area of coverage of where that debris went is very consistent with what happens when you have a 12 gauge go off that close to a human body. So this is the ballistic gelatin I made and put on Manny. And now you have to remember where the location, and Paul is the one that is facing down around 5 o'clock in the storage room to the left-hand side of this. His hands were reported to be under his body, which is extremely significant. Tells me a story of how could suffering such a catastrophic injury and knowing the things I was trained with, especially with sniper training, that this is possibly the position he was in at the time the fatal shot coming. And I'll explain why my thought process on this is. That he's grasping his chest at his wound. He has staggered across the room or came across the room at whatever pace he could. And you can tell that there was some movement because the blood droplets have distance between the drops, and they're consistent. So he's moving at a consistent pace. Comes to the doorway, and in sniper training, and I was a sniper on our SWAT team for many, many years, that there is a switch located in the human brain that if you detach the brain stem from the brain, reflex, the way we were trained, all reflexes stop. You don't twitch, you don't pull triggers, that if you have a chance at taking and disconnecting and hitting that switch, all human movement will stop. Other than gravity takes over, you collapse, go down. So that if you have to take a shot to save a hostage, if you can hit that switch and you hit it right, it stops all movement. So this is one explanation that could have explained of why Paul's hands were still under his body, that switch was hit. And you'll see from the demonstration, like I said, trigger warning as this goes forward.
Your video from last night with Chris is pinned to the top of chat.
Okay.
People asking.
Okay. And for the video, like I said, we'll go over there and jump and watch it. It's pinned at the top of chat. And so you're able to jump that, use that link also. But in this picture here, just prior to the shot, I took a position because that angle of for the trajectory to have occurred, and this is what's left of Manny the mannequin. These parts I recovered. It came all apart. But prior to taking the shot, I had to make certain decisions to hit such a high acute angle that if you have the and the victim, of course, had body tissue all in the ceiling and blood spatter everywhere that was projected upward. For that to occur, to be carried certain tissue such as brain material at that angle, it has to be at a very acute angle, that the gun almost has to be well above, some, probably 70 or 80 degrees incline pointing upwards. The injury, as I understand, was started at the shoulder, up here at the neck, and then into the skull, the cranial vault, causing this catastrophic event to create this blood spatter and detach his brain, which was found at his feet. And for this to occur, like I said, this acute angle has to be for the fact that there's no other angle that will allow the detachment of that body tissue, especially the brain, to come at your feet other than gravity and whatever forces are used at the time. And so when the shot went off, this, as you see, the ballistic gelatin, I went out there and stop framed the video and created this slide. And you can see that the ballistic gelatin absolutely goes in a 360-degree circle, and all the debris does the same. And there's something that's created from your body fluids and your blood the blood spatter, and what I used in this, of course, was synthetic blood, which reacts in the same manner as blood. But that blood goes into almost like a mist. Some of the blood is mist, some of it's size of drops that are all across the board. What is normal blood spatter, all the way down to what is you have low velocity blood spatter, you have medium velocity blood spatter, and you have high velocity blood spatter. When you get the high velocity blood spatter, that is a fine mist. It's, I mean, you're talking about blood droplets that are the size of less than the head of a pin, and all the way down to the sharp end of a needle. You have all this blood is created due to that high velocity. It's 100 feet per second and greater what it takes to create that mist. And we have to remember that, for the fact that if you ever find an individual that has high velocity blood spatter on them, they can have all the other blood in the world they can get. You can have transfer bloods where you go into a passive pool of blood, or if you touch a victim and you get blood on your hands and you touch yourself, that you may have some types of transfer. But that is not a low velocity, medium velocity, or high velocity blood transfer. The low velocity is, it can just be from falling blood due to gravity, falling at the once it gets to a certain size, it'll drip away from the body, and you can be splashed with that. But that has a different size of blood pattern that is recognizable. When you get to medium velocity, that's more where someone may hit you with some type of object and creates a splashing effect, and you can get up to that. But to create high velocity, it's generally gunfire. And so if you ever find anybody that's ever has high velocity blood on them, it's for the fact that they put themselves in a position being near a crime scene. I have in this video, as you'll see, some of the clothes are that I have pictures of. I have high velocity blood spatter on me, but I'll put myself in a position that I would have that. Most people will never have that. And when we get closer to the end, I'll explain the importance of, it doesn't really matter what type of blood it is, even if it can't be tested. As long as it tests positive for blood, it's extremely important. And we need to remember that point on high velocity blood, because that's part of, let's not lose sight and can't see the forest for the trees, because it's really not DNA that you can have certain samples of blood that you can't analyze for DNA due to the collection process, the testing process, and you may get it down to the point that it's blood, but you don't know the DNA profile because it's been diluted. But how often can you get blood on you from high velocity? And that is a separate story, and someone have to explain that. That if you're there, and that's one of the points that we have to analyze, that if any type of blood is found on any article of clothing owned by Alex, and they're able to identify it as blood, and it's high velocity blood, it really doesn't, in my opinion and perspective, that you do not get high velocity blood unless you're standing next to something that has been shot and you're extremely close. And I'm talking about within just a couple, 3 feet. You can't be 100 yards away. You can't be 1,000 feet away. You can't walk up and get high velocity blood 3 hours later. You have to be there at the time of the catastrophic event of the gunfire to get high velocity blood, regardless of what the DNA profile says.
Chris is here.
Hey, Chris. And thank you, Chris, for what the videos. And he's helped me a lot this week and letting me go out and do more things rather than sit and just create and create. Yes, I went out and getting ready to do the luminol testing and almost there. But this was the moment of the trigger when as you can see, the debris has and the catastrophic event has happened. the ballistic gelatin is just starting to move outwards. You can see that the main part of the load of shot has penetrated the ceiling area, and you can see the debris from the as the wood fragments, and everything is exploding from the ceiling. Then, with just a fraction of a second later, you can see that we have some of the ballistic gelatin as it moves out further in that circle, going in every direction. And some of it went behind him, some of it went to the forward and went to the sides. There's ballistic gelatin everywhere. There's ballistic gelatin in the ceiling. And then a fraction of a second later, it continues to move outward. And of course, you have Manny the mannequin with his catastrophic destruction. And then we have the ceiling. Took a picture of it, and you can see some of the synthetic blood spatter and some of the ballistic gelatin embedded in the ceiling. And I took a close-up of that, so you can see that one particle of ballistic gelatin that embedded itself in the ceiling tile. And then, of course, you have high-velocity blood spatter that's surrounding it. And so that was a couple feet above his head. And that's what I was saying. You have to be within a certain area to be able to get that high-velocity blood spatter. And that's just another close-up of it. And you see these smaller, that they go, and like I said, it's every size imaginable, down to the smallest. It's just whatever you're, if you take a magnifying glass, you can see even, or put it under a microscope, there's even smaller, like I said, it goes to a fine mist. And then as I was laying on the ground from that shotgun muzzle, being that this, I chose to lay on the ground, doesn't mean that Alex was on the ground, but it is I have a high probability that more than likely he was, or he was kneeling, or I don't believe that there was any type of struggle over the firearm, because you have the firearm. The first injury is to the shoulder outside of the armband, and you wouldn't be fighting. You wouldn't have a hold of a firearm that's outside of your shoulder. You wouldn't be fighting over it, in my opinion. But I went ahead and did the laying prone, face up, so I can manage the shotgun, line it up to create the shoulder, throat, head injury, and the catastrophic event. And after it was over, I looked at my Yeti suit, as I call it. And on my right leg, I had all this blood spatter from different materials, that I'm under this cloud of mist and ballistic gelatin and the synthetic blood that's above me. And it has to come down due to gravity. And it came down. It rained on me. I have high velocity blood droplets from my head down to my toes. Some of it you can't see unless you put it under a magnifier or a microscope. And such as this area that was on my left leg. All these little spots, this is a 6-inch ruler, and you can see the measurements. But these little spots, that's high velocity. That's from a mist of the blood pattern, and it cannot occur unless you're extremely close during the event. Like I said, it doesn't hang around. If you watch the video, you'll see everything disperse. You see this big cloud of styrofoam that goes out. And Chris did a really brilliant thing when he brought it back together and stop frame and things. Absolutely amazing. And it's what I have seen on crime scenes before. It's what happens. But I just pointed out some of the high velocity blood spatter, not all of it, but just some of it. And even in this photograph, you can probably count another 40, 50, 60 high velocity blood spatter droplets. And that would be the importance of finding Alex's clothes. If he has any high velocity on any clothing he's owned or has ever owned, that is the thing. That all blood is not created equal. And even if you can't identify that it's human or non-human, but you still have to, if it's blood, it's blood. And where could you possibly, if you're reporting a homicide and that you've discovered two victims and you have high velocity blood on you, because I think there's some blood that was discovered that has been testified to. I don't know the classification of it. I don't know if it's a small transfer or don't know if it was a high velocity. But if you're ever watching any case and you, not just this case, but any case that you're out there looking at in the future or ever that you're trying to determine if the shooter was involved, if there's high velocity on him, he was a witness at least to that crime scene and was in extreme close proximity of the shot. And but that was what I was wanting to cover tonight on this, and there's still a lot more to do. There's no way on these crime scenes that you can cover every aspect of what law enforcement looks at and what we analyze. But these are some of the things. Everything tells a story, from the stippling to the angles, the trajectory, to even the different levels of velocity of blood spatter. And it's extremely interesting, and I appreciate y'all's attention on this. And if you like this, of course, make sure you share it with everybody. And if you want to watch the video, go over to Chris's channel. And like I said, it's pinned at the top. It's in the description. And then you'll be able to see that. You'll get to see me in my Yeti suit as I go over there, and you get to see me position myself. And you'll see the moment of the gunshot and of both gunshots, of the chest shot. And then you also see the moment of the catastrophic fatal injury recreation. And all right, we got any questions?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All right. So the first thing we're going to do is start with Dave. Shout out to all the victims of the horrible earthquake.
Yes.
That is unimaginable.
It is.
Yes. Okay. And Joe Kelly, this diagram is terrible. Where are the tractors and where is the wall that Maggie's footprints were going between?
Yes. And I know that they said that this was not to scale. And I absolutely, with all the modern technologies. Now, they said that they recreated it on some software and the jury saw much better. But whenever you go to a jury, let's not be lackadaisical about anything. That was extremely disappointing to me, that this is one of the things that brought in. Now, any notes that an investigator takes can be called into court. And of course, this could be, but is this the best product? You always want to try to get the best product in that represents the greatest amount of information to scale, so that people can analyze it and understand it, and no one's confused. And they want to see those details, because we've seen so much CSI now that we expect to almost see a 3D interactive crime scene. And that's coming, guys. Absolutely. There 3D imaging out there. In a few years, you're going to be able, that those juries will walk through, and they do on some crime scenes, that you already have that ability. It's extremely expensive, the equipment is, and to do that, but that's coming.
Okay. And Joe Kelly, how close was the first shot? Or we don't have that in testimony yet.
I know that they, it's been reported, and I haven't seen the testimony, but it's been reported that he had, that both Maggie and Paul had stippling. For stippling to occur, it has to be within 4 feet. The size of that stippling will dictate how close. Some of the images I saw was indicative it's probably just a foot or two on Paul. I'll be doing a follow-up recreation for Maggie and some of the stippling, and not having first hand information on some of this, I couldn't tell you exactly.
All right. And Jenny GA, wouldn't shooting a shotgun be pretty hard from the hip? Sorry, y'all. I have many questions.
No, no, it's not hard from the hip. I just don't prefer doing it with a shotgun. Now, I've shot shotguns my whole life, bird hunting my whole life, and no, it's not anything that can't be done. Of course, it's against all the safety rules. You want to absolutely be in control, but then, of course, we're not talking about an individual that is a responsible individual. We're talking about someone committing a homicide. And was there a reason that he was holding that gun in that position? There could have been a struggle trying to get control of the gun when that first shot was fired. There's so many things and so many variables we don't know. But no, that's not the preferred position to fire a firearm is from the hip. But that angle dictates that it was somewhere's on that line. He could, the offender could have already been on the ground or on his back, leaned up, or he could have been shooting from the hip. I chose the hip because it was the easiest one for me to do, and I just chose that at random.
And Pigeon Mac, Mr. Steve, in your experience, can somebody survive a headshot with shotgun like that? I have a great uncle who took a bullet in the head in Korea War, but that was no shotgun.
I watched a man survive I was on a two-man sniper team. My partner shot a man at 73 feet with a 308 sniper rifle in the cranial vault. He survived it. Yes, people can if the energy is outside of the cranial vault, which my partner we had a hostage. Hostage survived miraculously, but the individual survived. So yes, things happen. Just because you do a headshot doesn't mean that.
But that was a rifle, not a
that
shotgun.
was a rifle also, not a shotgun. But yes, if it doesn't enter the cranial vault, you can probably survive it. But a shotgun blast of this nature, no, you're not going to survive it. No, no.
Okay, Joe Kelly. So was Alec Perp standing outside the room the first shot and then backed up to shoot from beside the door?
I believe and there could be some movement, but we know. Let's see. Let me get to here where you see the blood spatter marked just above the blood trail. The first injury could happen within 2 or 3 feet of that, and then the blood. If I had the other data, and we had the actual blood spatter, and I pulled string, I can tell you almost exactly where he's standing in that room at that first shot. I don't have that information. If I had it, absolutely, I could say this is where Paul was at. But not having that information, I only have the blood trail. The blood trail starts about midway of this room. This room is about 10 foot deep. So somewhere around 5 to 6 feet back is where this blood trail starts. Doesn't mean that's the exact spot where the shot occurred, but it does mean that's the spot when the blood finally reached the floor along his body, either dripping or running down and creating, as the blood droplets due to gravity are pulled away and they start falling at that size. And so we know he was there when those blood droplets were hitting the floor, because there's another picture of this area that shows 90-degree blood drops. And for 90-degree blood drops to form and impact the floor, you have to be 90 degrees straight above. And we see that there. So Paul, when the shot was fired, is within a foot or two of that, but he's here long enough upright to create this start of this blood trail. And if he has stippling on him, the muzzle of the shotgun has to be I would guess, if it's extremely small stippling, within a couple of feet, 18 inches to a foot, or even less. Because I don't know what type of shotgun choke or anything on it. There's a lot of variables in this. But no, I think the individual, the offender, was in the room with Paul when the gun went off. And then for whatever reason, as I spoke in the last video, I've also fallen walking backwards, trying to do either in training or an actual close quarter battle fall, and which is not a good thing. Being on your back is never a good thing. And is this what happened? Possible.
Okay. And single mama 4, what switch wears it at in a person's body and that stops all movement of the body? Is that the brainstem?
If you go in there, there's about a 2-inch band that where the brainstem hits the brain. That if you go in there and look, that's what snipers, we call it the switch. That if you hit that, or that's the way we were trained back. Now they may change that name because that was back in the 90s when I first started going through sniper schools. And but if you disconnect the brainstem, it shuts down all body movements.
All right. And Ophelia, question: are his clean shoes not a problem if he claims to have checked for a pulse? Surely it shows he changed clothes.
Let me get to which one is it?
Huh?
No, I think it's this one. I can't see it. Take off the writing there at the bottom. Yeah, there you go. If you see here at the very bottom of the outside the threshold of the door, there's a large pool of appears to be some type of stain, and more than likely it is Paul's blood. And so if he stepped in any of this area of where there is this blood cloud of mist that would have been from that injury, there should be some type of transfer on the bottom of his shoes. Absolutely. Now I don't know if they check for that or if they look for shoe prints, but more than likely, actually in mine, I'll be able to tell you because I put on white booties for my test, and I'll be luminol testing those white booties in the next day or two, and I'll see how much transfer from walking through my crime scene that I created, if there is the any type of transfer that collected on my shoe, just from walking through, not touching anybody, but just walking through that crime scene.
All right. And Denise A., do you cover Maggie's shooting too?
Yes, in the next week or so, I will. I've got it's on my schedule, and we are in the process. And I do have ballistic gelatin, and already set up for that.
And Jennifer McIntyre, have they ever said if they tested AM's hands for GSR?
Yes, they did. And but the part about gunshot residue is that he on his 911 he says he went to the house and got a firearm, in which law enforcement reported they recovered a firearm from the scene that was over there next to Alex's vehicle, and he handled it. I don't know how freshly fired it was, and plus he's a hunter. And his vehicle has probably been used, and there's a lot of problems with gunshot residue. Just like testing me for gunshot residue is useless. I handle guns all the time, and Mrs. Steve would probably be useless testing her for gunshot
Pretty much
for gunshot residue, and but it just depends on how often you handle guns and how well they're cleaned and how fresh they've been fired.
Okay. Let's see here. I'm behind, of course.
Oh, that's fine.
I stay behind on this. All right. And SSS, if you wore, say, a blue polo style or button-up shirt over a white T-shirt, would a white T-shirt have gun primer powder residue on it?
Some of the whenever a gun is fired, it's just like the other. It creates this mist of a cloud of smoke and chemicals, and anything exposed absolutely could have some type of residue on it. But just don't know. I don't know what they tested for and don't know what they found.
Okay. And Mr. Steve, this is awesome, but where are we getting the info about the shot trajectory, since I haven't heard that presented in the trial yet, although maybe I missed it? Thanks.
I went looking at the scene, seeing where the blood trail starts. That's where I put Paul at, and I knew, or Chris was able to look up, and I think he said that Paul was 5'7". And knowing the general area of where the gunshot was, and seeing the window that appears to have a gunshot through the back of it, and there's other crime scene photos that are focused on that window. And law enforcement doesn't take pictures at random about much of anything. So if they have a picture focusing on something that is center of that picture, then that's what they're looking at. And so I assume some of this stuff, and I may be wrong. And if I'm wrong about this exact trajectory and this angle, the mechanics of it are correct. And law enforcement would still look at the details regardless of what defects and where the trajectory was. The end result will be the same and they will get that point across. I just looked at this, and this is what I'm speculating and looking at, and like I said, the principle of it is correct, regardless if I have the exact and what the meaning of this is.
All righty. Yeah, okay, that one's gone. I'm trying to leave him there longer. All right, and SSS, does anyone know if he told the caregiver to lie about how long he was there that night, or was it after the murders were discovered?
I think from the testimony, that's one part of the testimony I saw with the caregiver, that she spoke with him a day or so later at the, they have a different name for it in the Low Country, but a wake is what we call it here in Georgia, of where she was speaking. And that's where I think he first hinted that he was there for 40 minutes. And she, of course, was deeply affected by that, and remembers it and testified to that.
And missed. Okay, so raincoat today didn't have blood and just had GSR. Mr. Steve, just guns maybe?
I don't know if they tested the raincoat for GSR or not, but and I didn't see the testimony today. I was working on this and working on the crime scene. But if your analysis is that there wasn't any blood on the coat, which I would assume, because that would be one of the things that they would have brought in even earlier. And so if there's not blood on it, there's not blood on it.
Mm. And oh, that's for me. Yes, I am. See, I got me a nice, lovely, hard splint for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
But no cast.
She's recovering.
Thank goodness. All right. And Joe Kelly, I thought they thought both shots came from someone who is not in the feed room.
If there's stippling on the body, then that's not the case. Now, unless that information is absolutely wrong, but if there's stippling on the body, that's from a close proximity shot.
Okay, and Grammy, Nini, would bone react differently than styrofoam?
Oh yeah, of course. And now the bone still has there's a term for it. It still has a elasticity to it. But the forces at that distance, of course, bone isn't going to blow away in the wind like styrofoam. But it will, at that distance, earn 3,000 to 4,000 pounds of kinetic muzzle energy and kinetic energy of that shot transferring into the body. it's going to vaporize. It's going to fragment and splinter, and is not going to be able to withstand those pressures. And they don't. And if you go out there and search it on the internet, there's photos out there that demonstrate exact what that looks like.
Okay, so hold on, I'm almost done here. Okay.
But yeah, I just use styrofoam for the fact that now you can buy some of these ballistic gelatin skulls that have simulated bones and things. I just haven't started simulating the bones and things on close quarters that close. Everything just goes into a mist. Anyway. Yeah, it blows up anyway.
Okay. In Single Mama 4. So today they talked about GSR and something called particle list. What is that?
I'm sure it's the particles and the different chemicals that make up the gunpowder, and they're made from certain compounds, and when the gun is fired, cause that explosion. Some of that gunpowder is converted into different types of particles, and then some of it is unburned and comes out through the muzzle blast, and creates the tattooing and the stippling. And so I would imagine that's what they're talking about, the particles. And sometimes it can even be pieces of lead and things.
All right. And the Rockaways. Was Murdaugh wearing that raincoat to limit the blood spatter and make cleanup easier? He would still have to wash blood spatter off his face and hands, right?
Well, if you go back to one of my luminol tests that when I was on the Delphi homicides, if you go to those luminol testing things, you'll see that even on floor mats, which is a form of rubber, that when you clean blood residue, which I use synthetic blood on those, there's still remnants of that there. It's extremely hard that if any type of blood transfer is if any article is exposed to it, it's extremely difficult to clean that article and destroy all that blood. So if that raincoat was exposed at that close proximity, I would expect they would find some type of blood profile or some type of blood evidence, even if it was clean, washed down.
Okay. And Joe, does the person have to pump the shotgun for the second shot?
There's all different kinds, and they don't have a homicide weapon. Was it a pump? Was it a semi-automatic? We don't know. I believe there's a couple guns missing, and I believe one of them, I know the 300 Blackout's missing, and I think reference has been made that possibly a semi-automatic shotgun is missing also. Or they don't know. It may not be missing. They just don't know which one of the shotguns was used, which they would test. And if that shotgun is used at that close range, it will have some type. And I think one of the experts mentioned that there were some brown stains on one of the shotguns that he looked at. And if those brown stains are high velocity stains, then it has been used in some type of close proximity gunfire that would result in a fine mist, which is within a couple feet.
And the mob crew. I wonder if prosecution is going to talk about his clothing he was wearing before, and where are they? Also, why hasn't prosecution made note of the lack of GSR on his white shirt? Just minute amount.
I don't know. Will they bring it up, or will they just let the jury's imagination wonder about that? If they can find it, and if they don't bring it up, it's because they don't have it. And otherwise, are they just implying that he may have changed clothes and destroyed that clothing? And the lack of GSR on his white shirt, in my opinion, even if he had a substantial amount of GSR. He's at a hunting camp in a vehicle he used for hunting, handled a shotgun that has probably been fired forever, how long he's owned it. And so the GSR, like I said, to me, would not convince me one way or the other.
All right. And Josh the Posh, what happens to the recoil when a shotgun is shot from the hip?
It takes your arm back. I think you'll be able to see it. Chris may be able to slow that down. You'll see where the recoil of the gun just goes whatever your arm strength and ever how much resistance. Now, some firearms that the semi-automatics, they may not fire a second time. That some shotguns require not only the gas, but a certain amount of resistance for them to operate. Whereas if you fired one shot and it failed to operate, now you have a failure to feed. And is that why there wasn't a second instantaneous shot in the feed room, that the gun had a failure to feed and it was having to be operated and it wasn't cleared? Or, I mean, there's so many variables and possibilities, but that is one thing that may have occurred.
Okay. All right. And Ella, James, if the rifle had a sling, would it be long enough for the gun to hang down to shoot, kind of like Rambo style?
Anything's possible. Yes, absolutely. Some of them are carried in such a manner, but some of the more tactical ones are just up under the arm and where they'll come straight up into the shoulder. I don't know what type of sling system those firearms had, shotgun or the rifle.
All right. And verbal, the hip, because that has a big kick to it, Mr. Steve?
Well, when I fired the shotgun I used, which was a pump, I fired it, not the butt of the shotgun was not on my hip. I shot it just off and had my hand close to my right hand pocket outside my body line and just let the firearm kick into nothing.
All right.
12 gauge, especially 3-inch 12 gauges, are not pleasant to shoot. I've never really been. I was raised with shooting a shotgun that had a little bit less recoil.
All right. And Ann, Mr. Steve, as I understand your presentation, there were 2 shots that hit the sun. Do they have those exact shells or casings or whatever parts of the bullets in my uninformed lingo? Thanks.
They'll have the casings. Now, they would have sent the shells to be analyzed, and this being a hunting camp and kennels, I don't know how many shotgun shells they may have found or how many shells. I mean, you can look at the house that they're recovering spent 300 casings outside the gun room door. So they may be dozens and dozens of rounds that were recovered, spent. I don't know. But did they recover both of those shot shells? I would expect so. For the fact that I know they recovered a couple of spent casings from the room. Were those the ones involved? I don't know. If I'm looking forward to catching up on all that evidence.
All right. And Dan, what's your theory about the change of weapons as between son and mother, since that change up would have had been done quickly, assuming mom was fleeing?
And that's something we might not always. And I don't assume that mom was fleeing. And I've seen this happen a lot of times, and it's part of nature. Moms don't usually flee. When it comes to their children and protecting them, moms have a very a huge instinct to protect and attack, and that
hurt you.
And it's just part of nature. It's not always that someone hears a gunshot and they immediately flee. Now, they may be going to go get something to come back with and attack you with. And is that what was happening? Was there something that she knew where there was another firearm? But it's possible that she was fleeing, or it was possible she may have been on the attack, or it's possible she was going to go get a gun. And so it's not always fleeing. And I don't know which one of those would explain it, but I've seen that human nature, more often than not, the mother has those protective instincts.
And Chrissy, right? We're going to stop at Chrissy. Now with GSR found on his clothing, said at today's trial, what is your take with this new evidence?
Well, like I said, he's a hunter. He handled a firearm, and was that the purpose of him telling 911, I'm going to go get a shotgun? And so that he could explain away. But would he have changed all his clothing? If that was the clothing that he had on at the time of these homicides, I would imagine there would be some type of blood spatter on them. But now he may have taken off one layer. Don't know. But GSR, I'm not a real big fan on GSR. And like I said, it's so easy to be transferred, and you're talking about a hunting camp.
And Mist, would you expect that Alex would have known about the switch?
No, I don't think he would. I was a hunter all my life prior to that, and until I had that type of training, I didn't know about that.
All right. And Libby 3, in your opinion, was this a professional sniper or a novice hunter?
The averages say it would just be an average, just trained citizen that, for whatever reason, decided to commit these homicides. But no, if you're looking at some type of professional individual doing it, it would have been much cleaner, I would expect.
And Sean, am I safe to say that not all gunshots bleed instantly?
Now, low caliber, you could be correct. Some of the lower caliber. But this type of injury at this type of range, with these two types of firearms, they're going to be bleeding. Anytime you have a pass-through wound, it's instant. Because when you put all that kinetic energy with body, human tissue, it blows out the back and it pressurizes. You have back spatter and you have forward spatter. And that's due to the energy that's transitioning in the body, and it's instant. And then, of course, on that first heartbeat, if there's any voids, then it fills and blood starts to flow.
Okay. All right, and single mama 4, can his words to 911 come back to bite him? He told them, I did them so bad.
Yes, I mean, of course, everybody's going to have their why he said that, but that, yeah, it could come back to haunt him.
And Jennifer Rochelle, can you just buy a gun online and have it delivered?
No. Firearms have to be, there's a paper process, a paper trail that state laws, federal laws, ATF enforce, and you have to fill out those forms for it to be a lawful sale. Now, of course, people can buy guns from individuals that don't have that paper trail, but they're not going to be mailed and delivered.
And Mist, did you see testimony today that placed Alex at the kennels again?
No, I haven't. Like I said, I've been working not only this, but some other stuff that I'm working on and getting ready.
Half a day with me.
Yeah, I spent half a day with her today at the doctor's, and so I'm so far behind.
All right. And Joe, why does the door look relatively clean in all of the photos?
It does down towards the lower side, but when you look up into the upper corner. Let's see if I may have it. I don't know if, let me see. Up towards the upper half of it, Chris, and I didn't bring them in today, but there is some staining and some type of appears to be materials up at the top a quarter of the door.
And Joe, does that bench on the right go all the way to the front wall?
I don't know, but from here it appears so.
All right. And Joe, is one shot's wadding on the floor and one is in Paul? Do I have that right?
Yes. And when he's talking about wadding, is this stuff here? It's like a little flower petal. This is in shot shells. There's this little cylinder that is full of the shot. And whenever the shotgun's fired, this cylinder is pushed down the barrel, carrying all the individual shot. And once it comes out the barrel, it goes into this little pedaled like carrier. And the shot disperses and travels and starts creating this pattern. And this little plastic cup, if it hits clothing, a human body, door, anything it hits, of course, sometimes it sticks in it, but it won't penetrate because there's no weight to it. And like I said, it's just a little plastic cup. And but yes, I saw that wadding laying in the in that area next to that pool of blood.
And Molly, do you know why the raincoat was tested, but the tarp was not and was never tested, at least according to the defense?
I know, yes, I can understand why they would test everything. Why they would pick and choose not to test, I have no idea. But to test everything is the safe bet. I mean, you process everything that you can imagine, and failure to do so, the jury is going to look at, and it carries a lot of weight. That what if they didn't do their job complete? What did they miss?
All right. And Ella, is it harder to trace rifles, shotguns versus a handgun, or is there another benefit to using such large weapons? Seems like handguns would have been easier to maneuver.
Shotguns are harder to track, although there are certain things that can be tracked about them, but it's very limited. Rifles and handguns, of course, throughout, all the, you look at it and the characteristics of rifling and certain aspects of that are identifiable and have a history of being used in court. And shotguns have some parts of the characteristics. You still have that breech facing, you still have the firing pin, you still have ejection marks, even on a shotgun. But these plastic carriers and things that travel down that barrel, you're talking about a shotgun that has a smooth bore. Now, if it has a rifle bore that's shooting certain ammo through it, it may have and be identifiable just as much as a rifle would. But I don't know what type of shotgun was used on this, and if it, I would assume it's a smooth bore. But there are certain shotguns that have rifle bores, and you can identify them just as much as a rifle or a pistol.
And Molly Cuddle at True Crime Web, they were saying they found shell casing inside his house. Is that normal?
This is Steve.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how many shell casings I have washed and dried.
Yeah. So, yes.
Pretty much. All right. And Joe, was it 2 sizes of shot that Paul was shot with? I thought I read that in some document. I know Alec had 2 sizes in the one he retrieved from the house.
Now, the 2 sizes of calibers, I think they said that, and when I saw the crime scene tech testifying that she misidentified one of the shell case or one of the recovered unspent rounds from the shotgun was a 16 gauge, and she had miswrote it down as a 12 gauge. and he had two different caliber or two different gauges, not calibers, calibers, rifles, and pistols, but gauges of shells in that shotgun, which is extremely dangerous. Don't do that, folks. And catastrophic events happen. But if but he was, of the two shots that were described now about the injuries to Paul, one of them, my understanding, was double-aught buck, which is an extremely large caliber pellet. And when I say caliber, there's certain size pellets that are in there fitting a certain size. And then he was shot with a smaller shot, bird shot, which I think was like number 4 of a 12 gauge, 3-inch, and which are extremely, I think I got 3-inch right. And as you can see, that's what I shot these two shots with. And they're not pleasant to shoot. Even properly from the shoulder, not pleasant to shoot.
All right. And Ann, Mr. Steve, just to follow up, whether mom was fleeing or not, wasn't there a change of type of gun used? So why?
Yes, and that could be either that we have 2 offenders or we have one offender that wants it to make it look like there's 2 offenders. And so the defense story is going to be multiple offenders. The prosecution's story is one offender to make it stage and appear to be 2 offenders.
And Raleigh, do you think it was Alex or someone from the boating incident that did this?
I'm right now, the prosecution believes it's Alex, and we have reason, and my personal opinion, it appears to be so. And of course, there's some evidence I wouldn't put in, and I'm a trained law enforcement. The gunshot residue, I carry no weight with it. But I would look at the motive, the opportunity, being there at the time. Is he attempting to create alibis? His discovery, his story on the audio when he says that he turned his phone off, he's taking a nap, and now we have an audio of him within minutes of those phones never being used again. And I'm talking about just seconds, minutes, not hours, just within 4, 5, 6 minutes that those phones are no longer being used. And his voice is there. When people lie, they lie for a reason. And he's saying that he was napping at that time, and that's a lie. And if he's there within 4 minutes of the shots, and then he calls them in, and he denies being at the kennels, he would have a hard road to carry with me.
All right. And Joe Kelly, was she trying to hide where those tracks are between a wall and some tractors, as was testified about today? Where is the wall and the tractors on their silly not to scale diagram? LOL.
And I didn't see the testimony today, but I know they were talking about that building that has a roof that has that's covered. And I will look at that, but I don't know exactly where that tractor is, but it's across from the dog kennels. And I would assume it's this large, dark area that they're talking about where you see Paul to the left, Maggie's at 12 o'clock. And I'm assuming they're talking about this covered up area that's looks like it's 18 feet long or approximate and 30 something feet lengthwise.
All right. And Molly, how far away were the bodies of Maggie and Paul from each other distance wise?
Well, in this diagram, that's not to scale. We see some measurements that the distance between the kennel to the building looks like it's like 19 feet. My eyes, I don't have, are not as good. And then if you count that 19 feet horizontal, and then you go vertical 10 to 15 feet, I mean, you're looking at anywhere from 30 to 50 feet. But like I said, it's not to scale. I mean, we got 10 feet people. These people are represented as 10 foot tall in this not to scale. So.
All right, now you've got some more, but it's 9:15. You want to keep going?
Yeah, we can for a few minutes.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
Let me go see. Now, you've had some drop because President Biden's on you.
Oh, okay.
All right, so let me go back and see where I was at.
Appreciate everybody staying around and supporting the channel, and we appreciate it. And
all right, let's see here. Now, if I missed some, if you have a question, send it to Steve.
Steve at truecrimeweb.com.
That's it. All right, so let's see here. All right, we've done that one, so I got to get down here. Ooh, okay, normal for shell casings. All right, and this is from Jeff.
Hey, Jeff.
Steve, being Paul was shot with a shotgun, he could have possibly been shot closer to the doorway, and the shot would have pushed him back into the room further.
It's possible. It's not like what you see on TV as far, and that's the importance that if we knew where the blood spatter on this exiting of the wound and looked at that blood spatter, we would be able to tell you exactly. But yes, he could have been a foot or two forward, but at the moment the blood start hitting the floor, he's at some point, he's at that furthest point, and then he moves forward. But yes, he could have been a foot or two either way of that blood transfer. But we know that at some point he stood still long enough for 90-degree blood drops to fall in the room at its deepest point that we see that blood trail. But yes, you're correct. He could be a foot or two either way.
All right, and Kathy Chapin, shouldn't he have some blood on him? He stated he checked their pulses and took Paul's phone, but yet he had no blood on him. Oh, Chris. Chris donated 5 memberships.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. From such a devastating head injury, he may have checked. He may not realize how severe it was. I don't know what the head injury looked like, but I would believe that it would be absolutely something recognizable that that was not something that was necessary.
And Fuzza, do you think the prosecution is doing a good job? Do you know about one of the prosecution not wearing gloves and tossing the grass clippings from the evidence box with Alex's shoes? Oh my God.
Oh man. Well, everything about the evidence has been processed. They're not going to be able to do anything more with the evidence. It's been to the lab. They've already analyzed all the grass clippings and looked at all that. And there's a lot of stuff to do with those soil samples, grass clippings, especially with unknown people. But in this case, what happens in the courtroom is absolutely has nothing to do with it's poor decision making as far as the jury is going to see that this isn't what and they're going to have those same questions, and they may not know that it doesn't matter now, and they may say that this isn't what we expect, and we can't put our trust that this is way. So if the prosecution and has the law enforcement, they've made some, anytime you have a witness for the prosecution that says, no, we did not follow protocol processing, and we didn't put scales in the pictures. We don't have as we took these photographs, that's not good. And so some of the stuff has failed them, but now they've brought on some excellent witnesses, more recent. The firearm expert, I have a lot of faith in him, And the financial officer they're going to be bringing in, it has nothing to do with that, but with the law firm, I have a lot of confidence that that's going to carry a lot of weight. So the prosecution has to climb that hill, and they're climbing that hill. And it should be that way, that we don't instantly assume that Alex is guilty. He's presumed innocent, and the prosecution has to climb that hill. And the earliest days they weren't, but they have made progress.
All right. So you're through with your chat, but
Okay.
you've had somebody, and I can't find it, but somebody had asked a question about washing GSR off of clothes.
Yes, and it can be just like anything that you wash and with human and things that, yes, GSR can, and that's how come in this instance I don't give it a lot of weight, and I think there's a lot of other law enforcement officers that don't, for the fact that here in the South in Georgia, how many people have shot a gun this week?
Woo! Mrs. L has questions, became a YouTube member.
Thank you for your support. Appreciate that.
Like your name too.
Yeah.
That's cute. Mrs. L has questions.
But no, it can be washed, and I mean you're at a hunting camp, so there's going to be a lot of GSR on hunting jackets and vehicles because this was a hunting family. All
right, you're done.
All right, guys, I appreciate y'all coming in tonight, being here, and like I said, if you want to watch the replay of the video in real time, go and visit the Mob Crew. Watch Chris's channel there. If you're not subscribed to him, absolutely subscribe. We will be collaborating and going out and working on some code cases together. And I absolutely I appreciate Chris assisting me in this part, because while I do that, he can create some of the content so that we can get the message and information out there the best that we can. But we thank everyone for watching this video. If you liked it, share it, and subscribe, and we appreciate your support.
What thing you're going to leave that on? You're going to leave it on? All right. Thank y'all. Love you.
Let me find something.
See you next time.
We're going to leave it on that one.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.